Now, if you've got a DDJ-FLX4, then there's a good chance that you're only using a fraction of what it can actually do. Most beginner DJs, they'll use hot cues, maybe beat jump, and they'll never touch the rest of these pad modes. But hidden behind these 8 pads are some incredibly useful tools that can make your DJing faster, more creative, and way more fun. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what every single pad mode does, when to use it, and how I actually use it in my own DJ sets. My name is Blakey, I'm a DMC champion, and I've helped thousands of DJs level up through my online courses and YouTube videos. So let's get started. Let's go over exactly what pad modes are. Now here on the DDJ-FLX4, you can see that you've got 8 pads for each deck. And above those 8 pads, you've got these 4 pads here. Now these pads are the different pad modes. So whichever pad is lit up, that will be the pad mode that you're currently in. And I'm going to show you exactly what each of these pad modes can do. So let's start with the one pad mode that every DJ uses, and it's the one that I use more than any other, and that is hot cues. So let's go into the hot cue pad mode right here. Now you can see that all 8 of these pads are lit up right here, and that's because I have already set 8 different hot cues on this track, and you can see them here in the Rekordbox software. Now to make this video super easy for you to follow along, you can actually download the same 2 tracks that I'm going to be using throughout this video. They are my own practice tracks, and I've made them specifically to help beginner DJs like you master the fundamentals. Just click the link in the description where you can download them for free. So hot cue A right here, I've got that set on the very first kick drum. So as soon as I press this hot cue pad, the song will start playing from that first kick drum. And this is why they're probably the most important pad mode for DJs, because it allows you to trigger this song from any of these different points. Now, if I want to delete a hot cue, all I need to do is hold down Shift and then press any one of these lit pads which have already got a hot cue set. So let's delete hot cue A. And then if I go back to the very start of the track and get that playhead position right at the start of that kick drum, I can then set this hot cue again by triggering the empty hot cue pad. Now it's totally up to you how you set them. And in fact, a lot of DJs only set one hot cue right at the very start of the track on the first kick drum, like I've done with hot cue A. And in fact, that is the one hot cue that I would recommend starting with on every song that you put into your DJ library. Set the first hot cue on the very first kick drum of the track, and then if you like, you can start setting hot cues at the start of the breakdown, at the start of the drop, and then maybe at the start of the second breakdown and the second drop, because this will give you options for different points of a track that you can jump to just by pressing that pad. And then inside Rekordbox, you can right click on any of these hot cues and then click add comments, and then you can change the name of it to anything you like. If I could only keep one pad mode on the DDJ-FLX4, it would definitely be hot cues. This is the one that I use more than any other. But there are also some other amazing pad modes, like the next one, which is PadFX1 right here. So now that I've gone into PadFX1, you can actually see on the Rekordbox screen, the display has changed. And this will show you exactly what each one of these pads does. Now, pad effects are simply effects that you can trigger by just pressing one of these pads. And this is very different to how effects usually work on DJ controllers. Right here, you've got the beat effects section, and this is usually where you trigger your effects from. And it works really well. But honestly, once you start using pad effects, you might actually go off using the beat effects section on the Flex 4 because they're so easy to use. They're intuitive, they sound good, and they're completely customizable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this track and I will trigger a few different pad effects so that you can hear what they sound like. So those right there are the default pad effects that are already set up in Rekordbox. And honestly, these sound really good as they are. But if you like, you can actually go in and completely customize these effects or change the effects that are assigned to each pad. So to do that, all you need to do is go to the settings right here. And this is where you can go in and change the effect to anything else you'd like. Or you can change the beat value for each of the effects. And right here, this is where you can change the amount of effect that's being applied. So if you think, for example, the reverb is too quiet, you can change that from 30 to 50. But the truth is, as I just mentioned, the way that these effects are already set up, I actually think is really good. So I would recommend leaving these as they are and getting used to how pad effects work with the default settings, because you might find that they're good enough for you already. But if you do need to go in and customize those effects, you can do that. It is very easy to overuse effects as a beginner, and this applies to the pad effects and the beat effects. Effects should be there to enhance a transition and a DJ set, not to drown it out. So my advice would be to use these pad effects sparingly, because when you start overusing effects, it's a really quick way of giving away that you're a beginner and an amateur. So use them sparingly, because when it comes to effects, less is more. Okay, next up we have the beat jump pad mode, and this one is incredibly underrated, and it's one of those features that as soon as you start using it, you'll never go back. So let's go into the beat jump pad mode right here. And you can actually see what each pad does right here in the Rekordbox screen. So these two pads will jump backwards and forwards by 4 beats. These two pads will jump backwards and forwards by 8 beats. These pads are 16 beats, and these pads are 32 beats. Now, when it comes to beat jump, the only pads that you're really going to be using are these two here, which are 32 beat jumps. Now, if you see different numbers right here in the Rekordbox software, you can just use these left and right arrows, and these will change the values. But what I recommend doing is making sure that 32 beats backwards and forwards are set to these pads here. Now, what does beat jump actually do? Well, it allows you to jump forwards or backwards in a track by the amount of time that you've chosen. And crucially, the DJ software will keep it perfectly on beat. So right now, I've got this track set on the very first kick drum of the track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to hot cue, and I'm going to set that hot cue on the first kick drum. Then I'm going to go back to beat jump, and this is where I'm going to jump forwards by 32 beats, and I'm going to do that by pressing this pad here. And if you would like to set a hot cue at this part of the track, go back to hot cue, set that hot cue right there on hot cue B. This is a great way of setting hot cues on any track super quickly, because all dance music is structured in sections of 32 beats. So by having all of these different hot cues set, each hot cue is set right at the beginning of a new phrase. So this is a really easy way of setting precise hot cues and being able to jump to different sections of the track very quickly. This one feature alone saves me a ton of time when I'm preparing my music. But you could also use beat jump when you're playing a song and the track is coming to the end, like it is here. Let's press play. Now you can see the track is going to end very soon. And you might find yourself in a situation where you haven't quite got the next track lined up. In that situation, you can use beat jump to jump backwards. And we can press it again. And if I press it again, so you can hear that every time I'm pressing backwards, beat jump 32 beats, it's jumping back perfectly in time. One more time. That's the genius thing about beat jump. It jumps backwards whilst keeping the track perfectly in time. Once you start using beat jump properly, you'll wonder how you ever prepared tracks or DJed live without it. This right here is probably the most underrated feature on the DDJ-FLX4. Now, if you're enjoying this video and you would like to learn how to use every feature on your DDJ-FLX4 properly, then you should check out my DDJ-FLX4 Beginner to Pro course. Inside the course, I guide you through every single part of the controller step by step. But I don't just teach you what every button does. I also teach you the core DJ skills that actually matter, so that you understand not just how to use your controller, but why you're using each feature in the first place. By the end of the course, you'll have the confidence to build and perform great sounding DJ sets of your own. If you'd like to check it out, then just click the first link in the description. Okay, next up we have the sampler pad mode, which can be triggered right here. And then inside the Rekordbox software, we need to open up the sampler window, which is this icon right here. And you can actually see the sampler section has opened in the middle of the software. Now, the sampler pad mode allows you to trigger your own samples from any of these pads. And to be honest, this is not a feature that I really use that much, but I do think that I'm in the minority there. I think a lot of DJs like to put their own samples on the pads so that they can trigger them during their sets. Some DJs like to trigger jingles containing their own name, and some like to trigger different noises like air horns and maybe synths and drums. So to use the sampler pad mode, all you need to do is drag the sound that you would like to use from the library section into one of the empty slots. Now, Rekordbox actually comes with a few different samples that you can use. So let's take this horn sample here, and I'm going to drag that onto an empty slot. So now all we need to do is press this pad here to trigger that horn sample. Now, there are some settings that you can change for each one of the samples, but to be honest, the way that the pad actually behaves when you load in a sample by default, to me, is correct. Every time I trigger this pad, the sample gets triggered, and then the sample will play until the end, and then it will stop. That, to me, is the right way to use sampler. So I wouldn't change too many of the settings on the sampler, but if you like, you can go to Edit, and then you can change the volume of the sample, which is very useful because that horn is actually a little bit loud. So I'm going to turn that down slightly. There's nothing more annoying than a DJ triggering a horn sample that's just way too loud. If you are going to set up a horn sample, then please don't overuse it. Set yourself a limit to maybe 5 or 10 air horns in an entire DJ set. Any more than that, and it can start to sound a little silly. The sampler is definitely fun, but for me, it's not an essential pad mode. It's useful, especially if you're a radio DJ. You can put your own radio jingles across these pads. But I'm more of a club DJ. And so for my own personal style of DJing, the sampler pad mode is not something that I absolutely need. But I know that a lot of DJs out there love adding their own samples. So have fun with it, just don't overuse it. So far, we've covered the main 4 pad modes right here. But if you hold down Shift while pressing one of these pad modes, you can actually see the secondary pad mode underneath. So if I hold Shift and press Hotkey, we are now in the keyboard pad mode. Now, the keyboard pad mode is kind of cool, but ultimately pretty useless for most beginner DJs. What keyboard mode will do is it will allow you to trigger one hot cue, but it will change the note or the key of that hot cue depending on the pad that you trigger. So you can see here in the Rekordbox software, this is +7 semitones, +6, +5, +4, and so on. Now you can actually choose which hot cue it triggers with this drop-down menu here, and you can see I've got it set to hot cue C. So take a listen to what happens if I trigger keyboard mode using this pad here. This will trigger the hot cue at the normal key or the normal pitch. But if I now trigger any of these other pads, you will actually hear that it triggers it at a different key. So really what this is for creative performances, where you might put a synth note or a piano note on one of the hot cues, and then you can start to replay different melodies by triggering different pads. Now, this is great for creative DJing and creative routines, but for beginners, I wouldn't recommend spending too much time here, because as a beginner DJ, there are so many more important fundamental DJ skills that you could be spending your time learning. As you start to progress in your DJ career, that is when you can start playing around with creative tools like this. It's a great one to experiment with once you've mastered the fundamentals. Okay, next up, we've got Pad Effects 2. So let's hold down Shift and press Pad Effects 1. And now we're in the Pad Effects 2 mode. Now this is exactly the same as Pad Effects 1. It's just a second bank where you can have a completely different effects set up. Now by default, this is kind of strange. There's a bunch of slip loop and reverse roll effects. My advice on Pad Effects 2 would be to go to the settings and change these to literally whatever you want to change them to. Let's put some echo in there. Let's put some reverb in there. I also really like space, and let's also put in some vinyl break. I think you should leave Pad Effects 1 completely stock and default, and then start to use Pad Effects 2 to try out some different things. This is where you can start trying out different things. And there are actually so many options for different effects that you can change the Pad Effects to. Pad effects are one of the most underrated things about the Flex 4, so my advice to you is start experimenting with them and start having fun. Next up, we have Beat Loop, which you can access by holding Shift and pressing Beat Jump. Now you can see here on the record box screen, this pad will set a 32 beat loop, this pad will set a 4 beat loop, and this pad will set a quarter beat loop, and so on. Now, usually when I set loops on the DDJ-FLX4, I just use the loop buttons here at the top. This button here will set a 4 beat loop. So let's press play on this track and then press that button. And you can see that that has set a 4 beat loop perfectly in time. And then if I want to double the length of that loop, I can press the right arrow here. And if I wanted to halve the length of that loop, I can press the left arrow. And then if I press 4 beat loop again, it will exit the loop. But to be honest, the beat loop pad mode actually makes looping way easier on the Flex 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this track and I'm going to set a 2 beat loop by pressing this pad here. And then as that loop starts to play, I'm going to incrementally make the loop shorter and shorter and shorter. And what this will do is it will create a build up, which can be a great way of creating tension before a drop. Now, when this is done right, it can sound really good. And it also works really well on a piece of vocal or even on a synth. Let's take a listen to what it sounds like a little bit later in the track. Okay, and the 8th and final pad mode is called Key Shift, and you can access this by holding Shift and pressing Sampler. Now, Key Shift is very similar to the keyboard pad mode with one main difference. Instead of triggering a hot cue with every single pad press, Key Shift mode will let the song continue playing, and then each pad will change the key or the pitch of the track. And you can see on the record box screen how much each pad will affect the key. So this pad is +7 semitones, this pad is +6, +5, +4, and so on. So now I'm going to play the track and press some of these pads, and you will hear that the track will continue playing, but each one of these pads will change the key of the song. So this is similar to keyboard, but instead of being able to play different melodies like you could with keyboard pad mode, Key Shift pad mode will allow you to change the key of the track as the song is playing. Now, to be honest, Key Shift mode is an okay feature, but not really one for beginners. Much like keyboard mode, this is the kind of feature that you're going to start experimenting with as you actually start to progress in your DJ career. At this beginner stage, I actually recommend spending your time learning the fundamentals first. Now, if you would like to know the fastest way to master the DDJ-FLX4 as a beginner DJ, then you should watch this video right here, which has already been watched by hundreds of thousands of other beginner DJs. And I've already had a ton of messages from beginners telling me how this video completely changed how they thought about DJing. So watch this video next.